All right. So what's up, man?
What's going on, brother? How you been, man?
Good. Just trying to survive like everybody else.
I hear you. Crazy times, man.
So today I wanted to interview you about just
Yeah.
your experience with LSVT and how it's kind of changed your approach to treating your patients. But first, go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know how you got into the field of physical therapy.
Well, my name is Michael Selstrom. I'm a PTA in Houston, Texas. I have been practicing for about 3 years now. I've also been a LSVT big certified clinician for 2 of those years. Which my renewal is actually, I probably need to do that this week because it's a 2-year interval. Well, I got into PT, playing sports in high school, throughout school, been through injuries, been through therapy. And I thought, well, hey, I want to work with athletes. This is what I like. So I went to school, figured out what it was about, went on rotations. Turns out I work a whole lot better with, the older population, and in particular, people with neurological conditions. And I found out like that is really where my passion is at. And so the last 3 years, I've worked in the home health setting along with inpatient rehab, and I'm still doing it to this day. I kind of bounce back between both, kind of change the pace up. But that's really how I got into it,
I love it, man. Just an honest question, did you feel kind of weary about treating neuro clients just because it's difficult initially?
For sure.
You don't know what's going on.
Oh yeah, for sure. It can be definitely intimidating, especially when the family's involved.
Oh yeah.
In the inpatient setting or even in the home health setting. You show up and they kind of look at you for all the answers.
Yeah.
And that can be overwhelming to know, but it can be for sure. When I first started, it was like, oh man, I got to figure this thing out, I would say, yeah, for sure it is.
I almost shied away just because there's so many variables. You don't really know where to start, what to do, and
Exactly.
It's not just strength training,
Yeah, you just kind of, it's easy to default to that every time.
Absolutely.
But you and me both know that that's not, the best way to approach them at all. It can be tough though starting out, especially coming from being a student and transitioning into, being a new therapist and trying to find your niche. I think is tough. But after all that shying away, and just being intimidated, I got to a point where I'm just like, I want to dive head first into this thing and just go for it. That's what kind of pushed me to get certified in LSVT big. I kept seeing these Parkinson's patients, and it seemed like we weren't getting anywhere, and I knew there was a better way to do things. I just had to figure it out. And so that's why I kind of signed up for the course to learn more, because otherwise I felt like, you're trying to push them into a weight shift or trying to force this movement.
Right.
And, it's honestly, it tears you up a little bit. You're like, man, I know there's something better I could be doing.
Yeah. How have you seen your approach kind of change after your LSVT cert, and kind of just explain the differences as far as you see a Parkinson's patient and you're trying to fix posture, but sometimes that's not always the right solution. But in general, how have you kind of approached things differently?
Well, after doing the course, I learned a lot. And also, it seems like you always want to attack posture and just go straight for it, especially with these patients that have a progressed or advanced Parkinson's, where they're so kyphotic, and you look at it and you hurt yourself and you're like, I've got to do something for that. So you just go straight for shoulders and posture work. But doing the course, it made me realize, okay, that's really kind of a structural deformity at this point, especially those that are more advanced, not early on.
Yeah.
And once it's a structural deformity, you're really just kind of wasting your time. Sure, you want to touch on it, but by all means, you don't want to spend all of your time on it. It changed from that to, okay, well, let's figure out a better way to have better postural stability and standing, or find a way to creatively make you weight shift better.
Right.
So you can move better. A more healthy movement amplitude is what I was after that point, instead of just trying to, oh, let's do long arc quads, or let's try to focus on your posture. And sure, you want to do some posture, but that kind of changed for me after I figured out another approach to kind of attack it.
So really kind of looking at limits of stability and how to challenge that with something that they like to do. And you're fortunate enough to be in the home health setting where you're in their environment and they say, I can't do this. And so you can almost directly do your treatment and then say, okay, go try it now.
Oh yeah, that's, a lot of people home health really gets a bad rap for the people that show up and they're not truly trying to even help a little bit with what their patients are doing. Another big thing I learned from it is finding what's meaningful for them, because a big part of the treatment is practicing things that they do on a daily basis,
right?
Things that have salience to them, things that are important and they have to do every day. With my guy, the example I have, he really liked to cook, and the wife really enjoyed when he helped dry the dishes, after they got done cooking and eating. And so that was a big functional kind of hierarchy task that we wanted to touch on, because he was losing his ability to do that. And he was struggling. He was losing his weight, he was losing his balance backwards. And just, he was declining. So
I'd say this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, or something that has been on my mind, as far as like everything you just said. People would say, oh, well, that's OT. Why would I do that? And so I just don't understand why we can't, not that I'm promoting like meshing the two disciplines, but
right.
Why can't I address that? And I think people just shy away from it because they say, oh, well, my shoulder hurts. And they'll say, oh, well, you have OT at 2:00. They can help you. And it's like, well, what the hell?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely inside our scope of practice. And, I find myself crossing over a lot, but I don't think there should be a big differentiator, except for the few,
Yeah, I mean, I understand billing purposes and all of that, but I think kind of shaping how you bill as well. So working on dynamic balance or weight shifting outside basic support, whatever. You can do the kitchen activity and label it as, engaging the patient in that dynamic stability or limits of stability,
right,
so that they can ambulate better. You don't necessarily have to, you don't have to say that you're working on, home management or kitchen tasks or anything. I mean,
exactly.
You can
You're
literally do anything.
Right. You're decreasing the fall risk with the things that, and that goes back to even decreasing their burden of care, with some of these lower level patients, and insurance loves to reimburse for that. But another thing, like the fact that these tasks that we're practicing are important to them and it's kind of emotionally tied to them, it's actually been shown to stimulate more basal ganglia circuitry. And they're more, they're more neuroplastic. They can make those changes, those neuroplastic changes more, when you put these concepts into play.
Dude, preach.
Yeah, man. It's, hey, I'm trying to get like you.
Everything that they want to do, we should be able to facilitate them in some manner, and you grade it as you can. But that's almost the perfect statement, is that giving them something that they enjoy and that they have to do on a daily basis is so much more meaningful, and it creates such a different treatment strategy and just a change in their ability to perform then let's put the cones from the table to the windowsill, right? Throw addition
Yeah.
at and give them some meaning, have the wife encouraged because she's wanting that as well. I mean, it could totally change how they progress. And so I'm really glad that you said that actually.
Yeah, man, it's a different realm at that point, I think. And I've kind of shifted in the last, since learning from you and just doing LSVT, I've kind of shifted how I approach people, My first questions are now along the lines of, what do you want to get back to doing, or what would be devastating to you if you lost the ability to do that?
Yeah.
That's a good way to find something that's kind of emotionally attached to them. And when they have that success, when you practice with them,
Yeah.
you can see it in their face, and it just stimulates them even more to want to keep going,
It means something. That hour with you means something, or the 30 minutes, whatever it is. It's not just therapy. It's,
Right.
hey,
Right.
I'm able to do this now because of Michael. Like, we can make such an impact. I mean, just from that statement too, it's like, I just help them be able to do X, Y, Z, not go from 5 pounds to 10 pounds. And that also goes into goal writing too, but that's another story. But
Right. Another video.
tell me a little bit about the LSVT big theory and like how does that work as opposed to anything else? Or
So LSVT big, it really started out as a Lee Silverman vocal training is really how it started out. It was the first lady years and years, I think like 30 years ago, that they had this treatment that they did with her, because this first lady, she just had very small volume. With Parkinson's, it's very common to see that flat affect, depression, even a lot of cognitive stuff, apathy. And so they started with her, and they had a lot of really good results with the muscles that control the vocal tone. I mean, the volume.
right.
So they thought, well, let's go ahead and transfer this into upper and lower motor limb training. And so after like 20 years of NIH funding, millions of dollars, they've kind of made the company that they are today. And there's thousands and thousands of certified clinicians. But at the base of it all, LSVT Big is a 4-hour sessions a week. So in a whole month, you'll do 16 sessions. And it's an hour a piece, and it's very intensive. A lot of the big principles are practicing what they have to do on a daily basis, and it runs off of neuroplasticity. And I know it's not different for like all therapy interventions. When you're going after Parkinson's, they focus on bigger movements, right? Bigger movements. That's usually the singular focus. What makes them more unique is the thought of, the idea of recalibration of their movements. So a lot of people know that Parkinson's, a lot of motor deficits, right? There's also a ton of sensory processing deficits that they hold as well. And they don't feel these small movements. They kind of feel, they know they're struggling, but they don't know they're super tiny. So where the therapist comes into play is working with them throughout the month. You've got 10 maximal exercises that you do with them every session, and you have to do them every day. They have to practice every single day. The way I tell people, it's like, this is not just an exercise protocol or program, whatever you want to call it. This is a lifestyle. You have to really buy in if you want to make these changes. And a lot of the big concepts of recalibration is just basically like triggering their internal cueing system, which is very hard to get somebody to do that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to even think about, well, how do you trigger their own cueing? And how do you ask somebody that already has a sensory processing disorder what they're struggling on? Like, a lot of the times they don't know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a conundrum, but asking the spouse or the family, you can find that out pretty quick. Those are really and neuroplasticity is what the biggest thing that they drive on, and a lot of key principles that you have to add with your treatments in order to make these changes. A a lot of big ones, like the repetition is huge. Throughout the program, you're going to do these thousands of times throughout this month, thousands of times. And that's, you know, it seems overwhelming to them. They're like, wow, that's a lot. But, you know, that's how you drive making those changes in the brain, those structural changes. And just because you have acquired a skill, you know, say you did it and there's that aha moment, does not mean you've made structural plastic changes in the brain. You have to continue to practice it. It's kind of like the don't practice till you get it right, but practice till you can't get it wrong type of thing.
There you go.
So those are the biggest things, you know. It has to, repetition is huge. It has to be intense, and it has to be complex, you know. They have to be challenged. If they're not being challenged, then they're not being stimulated enough. And see, so those big things are really paramount in that treatment protocol.
So essentially, if you're not increasing demand, then no neuroplasticity or no neuroplastic changes occur because it's subpar, essentially.
Yeah, it's not what they need, and you're not focusing on directly on their deficits, you know. That's one of the biggest things that they drive, and it's hard. Like this LSVT program, like I encourage everybody who's watching, I hope I spark interest in somebody to look into it, you know, because somebody essentially sparked it for me, and I was like, okay, let me see what it's about. Hopefully have that ripple effect and positively affecting lives. Exactly. But yeah, it's very exhausting on therapists too, because constantly throughout the hour session, you're modeling, you're cueing, and like you're talking the whole time. Although when you first start, you don't want to overwhelm them. So it's more of just do as I do, you know, simplify it. And then as they get that, continue on making it more complex and more complex, adding dual cognitive tasks. A lot of these patients with Parkinson's, like it's very slow processing and impaired executive function. They can't recall things. And, you know, as my guy got to a better gait pattern, you know, as we kind of went through the program, I was, well, how do I challenge this guy? And so while we're walking, I would say things like, well, what did you have for breakfast? Or what's for, you know, just make him rattle things off and see if he can maintain that safe, healthy movement amplitude to try and just make it hard for him. You know, the brain will really thrive on that challenge.
Yeah. So essentially kind of dual task training where you're trying to distract them from everything that you basically just taught them. So
pretty much, yeah, essentially.
You keep the same gait pattern while you're holding a plate and the food doesn't fall off, or a cup for that matter, a full cup, or they can answer a question while holding the cup and doing that. There's so many different things that you can play.
Yeah, even distracting environment, or add some obstacles that they have to step around. And I was adding to the point, trying to add realistic, you know, environmental changes, like having, okay, so you got to stop, you know, stopping and starting, you know, initiating and then stopping that gait can be really challenging for them. Even initiating a quarter turn, you know, you mentioned having the plate in the hand. This guy that I work with, our biggest things was get him back in the kitchen, because the guy could cook like no other. And so I would have him, you know, when I saw the gait was, okay, we've kind of recalibrated the gait and he's moving in a more safe movement amplitude. I'm like, well, here, hold this full glass of water and let's do that, you know. And sure, we spilled a little bit, but he got to the point where, you know, if he's going to steam vegetables or something, he's got to hold that water, walk to it, dump it in, and, you know, to get the task done.
Yeah, just keep adding challenges. And I think therapists overthink it, or they think in a repetition mindset. And so, oh, well, once that's done, then, okay, now let's do ankle pumps for 3 sets of 20 or something like that. And so continually stacking on the same task that you're doing, or just change something just a little bit, and you can spend 5-10 minutes on that.
There's really a lot. It's just limiting to how creative you can be with them, you know, and what they can handle. Of course, you don't want to have them weight shift so far to where they're losing their balance, you know. But with this guy, it was more of like practicing what he's going to do every single day. And the wife was just completely thrilled, you know, just talking about this specific example. Crazy to see, you know, and I would show up days just so tired, just end of the day. I've already worked a full day and I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to exert so much energy with this guy. You know, I just sit in the car for a second and just close my eyes like, golly. But the fact of the matter is, like, this guy doesn't need me to show up and be tired. He doesn't need me to have low energy. He's already low energy. You know, I found it really important to kind of bring that energy, and they'll kind of feed off of it. You know, this guy, he was a A&M track runner. And so I took to him kind of like a coach, and he was really receptive to it. And we just kind of hit it off and made a lot of good improvements.
That's awesome, dude. You should be proud. Just let you know.
Thank you, sir.
So
really rewarding.
Before we get to the video that of this guy that we're talking about, what are some things that all of us could do tomorrow or the next week that we could kind of take some of these theories and put them to practice, essentially?
I think depending on as far as how far they've progressed in their disease process, say if it's somebody who is relatively still functional but is having balance problems, you know, instead of focusing and harping so much on their posture, get them in standing and try to teach them a safe way to shift their weight. All these exercises that LSVT has, they all translate into function. The one we're going to show, the first one is a forward stepping weight shift. There and back, there and back. And I made it challenging for him to throw his arms out there and come on back. It's essentially start initiating and stopping their gait, and he's learning how to weight shift appropriately and safely. And I think instead of, you know, doing the regular stuff that we've known to have some, you know, positive effects, but not much, get them in standing, get them weight shifting, get them quarter turning. You know, a lot of these people have freezing. Freezing is so hard on the Parkinson's population, and it's so hard to, you know, it causes falls. You talk about freezing, it's like usually when they're doing something intentional, when they're trying to go through a doorway, or say maybe the wood floor is transitioning into carpet, or like a step up, anything like that, and they'll lock up. And it's like it's been described as like someone's glued their feet to the floor. I would say if you have a patient with Parkinson's that is dealing with freezing, there are a few strategies that have been really known to help. So when you feel their freezing coming on, the first thing I tell them, like my guy had a lot of freezing going on. I just told him, look, when you know it's coming, take a deep breath, relax. After that, I describe it as like a window pane in front of them, a pane of glass that they have to break through. As soon as they've relaxed and kind of fixed their posture and kind of, you know, got their body down a little bit, bust through that glass. And that translates to that anterior weight shifting video, the stepping. You practice that so much that it's like automatic. And so that was really beneficial to my guy. He didn't really have any freezing episodes, you know. The freezing is really just very rigid body. You have these opposing muscle groups that are co-activating at the same time, and then a lot of the times it causes them to fall, you know, lose their balance because their postural instability. They don't have these postural synergies that we all have when we feel our balance. You know, when we feel we're losing our balance, all these anti-gravity muscles like neck extensors, spinal extensors, hip extensors, they are very weak in the Parkinson's population.
They almost go into like a flexor synergy, and then on top of that co-contract, and then when they lose their balance, there's no riding reaction to be able to do it.
They've lost their riding. So I think just getting them and challenging them more in a fashion that's meaningful to them, you know, I think that should really be more beneficial than some of the more traditional ways, you know. And I encourage everybody to look into the LSVT program. Although I do use a lot of these concepts and interventions in a way that I can't do the full month program, it is still beneficial, I think, to drive neuroplasticity drive the repetition, drive the complexity of it. You know, that is really, really important if you're trying to make a positive change in someone's life. You're trying to make it meaningful, you know?
Yeah, I think that's great, dude. Let's pull up the video that you have of the guy that we've been kind of referencing.
Okay, let's see here. Give me a second.
And feel free to talk through it as you kind of go along.
For sure. I kind of hate watching myself on video because I'm like picking apart my own self and what I could do better, you know?
Well, you'll be fine.
All right, so this is my guy here. We're starting it off forward stepping weight shifting. He has progressed to the point where we first started just working on, I think we had to have arm support actually. One arm support, just getting the stepping forward and back, working that limit of stability. You know, the more he does it, the better, he'll find it. And he'll be more confident. Anybody will be more confident in their movements.
Right.
So now we've progressed. I wanted to challenge him. So I said, throw your arms out there. And that was very hard for him. I kept having to remind him. And then he got to the point where it was pretty much automatic. So we'll go through it here. I cue him for his knee. See, it's small.
I like it too because the steps are intentional and not hesitant. You know, like you can tell just right off the bat how
for sure
that's what I'm going to do and that's what I do.
Yeah, and that, when I tell him, look, if you feel like you're about to freeze through this doorway, think about when I worked with you. Think about how many times you've done this forward stepping and just break that glass. Like it has to be a lot of velocity, a lot of force with this movement, because with Parkinson's, they move so small and so, not really efficient at all. And so he got really good at that. And so I thought, you know what, I'll challenge him. So we'll step onto an unstable surface now. And I brought a Bosu ball for him. And he struggled a little bit on it, but this just kind of shows where you can progress towards if they get that kind of thing down. This is just harping on the constant challenge that you need to place on your patient to drive those changes in the brain.
Yeah, that looks awesome.
And I even see at the end, I'm like, man, I kind of pushed him a little bit. And just watching these videos, I'm like, man, I shouldn't have done that. Like, because never do I want to force it. Because a lot of the times I felt when I would try to give him that cue, he would fight against it. And it was totally just, we weren't getting anywhere. Like, just scrap it and do something else. Like, it's hard to be creative on it.
Just a side note on the future, when you're feeling that like retropulse, whenever you're trying to facilitate from a posterior aspect, go in the front. And actually, it doesn't take much, but get in such a position where you can actually facilitate forward. Like, so you'll be in front of him and grab his hand and kind of just guide him this way. And it makes a complete difference because they can't fight against you. They just have to go with you. And so it's very gentle.
True. You're very, it's funny. It's funny you say that because after that, I think a week or so later, we were doing like a rocking and reaching exercise, which is basically you're doing trunk rotation, but you're also weight shifting. So these LSVT exercises get kind of difficult for these patients, but I thought, he wasn't really doing good at it. He didn't want to rock into it. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to give him a target in front of him. And that worked. I had a lot more success with that, just, okay, try to touch this with your hand. Yeah. And that will really get them, that was trial and error, but very, very valid point there. Awesome. So this next one is a side stepping weight shift. It's very similar to the first one, but you're shifting laterally now. So a lot of this really translates into initiating a quarter turn when you're standing. This guy had to do a lot of that. Standing in the kitchen wasn't huge. And so you have to walk over here, you got to turn, you got to perform this task, And so I'll go ahead and play it.
But he does good, man.
Yeah, he got it down pretty good. What I was trying to get the first two were really good. And I tried to emphasize the head turning
Yeah.
because they don't want to turn their head. They don't want to rotate their trunk. That's also one thing I forgot to mention too, is trunk rotation is huge.
Yeah.
They really get rigid in that whole thorax, and there's no trunk rotation if it's someone who's really progressed in the disease. And this one is also, you know, you're facilitating the trunk rotation, the head turn, the weight shift to that side.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole lot going on there. That was a tough one for him to get down, to the point where I was like, man, okay, he had a picture of bears on one wall and then picture of like some horses on this wall. So I was like, dude, just look at the bears and then look at the horses, and then everything else will follow. And then we got some pretty good progress there. So
oh, it's great.
And this one was just straight magic. Straight magic. Like,
awesome. So it's forcing the weight shift because this is another facilitation from the anterior aspect where when you push against them, they have to push against you. And then if you back off, they come with you, and it forces a weight shift. And so,
and even with that one, like, he would sometimes get stuck. Like, say if he's pushing off the chair, he'd do good, but then right here, it's like, oh, and then I'm going back, you know? And I'm like, how do I just get him to, you know, to just keep weight shifting anteriorly so that he can perform his stand? I just told him, like, look, don't even worry about the stand. We actually just practiced just him leaning, pushing the ball first, all the way with the ball, and just focusing on the ball push. Now looking at it, I could have kind of had his arm a little more straighter so we can get more movement of his actual, you know, thorax and his trunk. But, you know.
Hey, I mean, if it's functional and you're starting, that's it.
Yeah. And so I appreciate getting that one. So this one is just one I wanted to add. Just having better standing balance was so important for him. And I thought, you know what? Let's do some boxing. They had some gloves, they had a little pad. And so this really drives increased velocity of the arms. If you even look, he's rotating his trunk a little bit with each punch.
Yeah.
You know, and this is all dynamic standing balance. And this is, he really got good at this one. So there's a couple seconds of it. See, he's rotating his trunk, he's moving, he's keeping his weight in a safe position instead of losing it going backwards. That's the biggest benefit I thought finding from getting him to box every session. You know, we would end it with boxing, and he would kind of take out his frustrations from his wife on the boxing. So,
and I think that's so good because there's a lot of difficulty in initiating and terminating movement. That's why they have boxing classes everywhere.
Yeah, rock steady, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly, and I think it's a great solution and almost assessment too. How are they doing? And then you can kind of gauge it based on that.
Yeah, definitely. If he's losing his balance while drying dishes, you know, well, let's try boxing. And, you know, first he kind of had some support, and then we kind of progressed to unsupported, and then bigger punches, more velocity, hit harder, you know. If they're hitting harder, they're generating more velocity, more force, and it's very healthy for the brain. It's very healthy for them.
Yes. That's awesome.
Yeah, this guy was a really good candidate. Like I said, he kind of took to me as a coach, and a lot of the times I felt like I'm just barking orders at him, but this guy really took with it and ran with it. A lot of the people, they might not progress as well as he did, because the LSVT program is adjustable. You know, they've got the standing exercises. You can do them in sitting. You can also do them in supine. Of course, the supine ones are more related to making improvements in like bed mobility and ADLs and decreasing caregiver burden, stuff like that. You're not going to get the same outcomes as the standing ones. And so it's nice how it's adjustable.
Yeah, there's a progression to everything.
For sure, man.
But that's good, dude. Well, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time.
Definitely. Thank you for having me, man. Like I said, I want I want to thank you, honestly, for making this awesome group. And I feel like every time you post something, I'm like, well, let's see what John's cooked up now. Like, I know he's got something on there, but I like it. There's so many knowledgeable people, knowledgeable therapists on there that have a lot of experience. It's kind of like iron sharpening iron at the end of the day, you know,
Oh,
just
I
helping
like
each other
that.
out. And yeah, man.
Well, I appreciate you for being a part of it and for coming and doing this interview with us. And I hope people can get some type of fire lit under them and kind of look at things a little bit differently. And let's just be better for our patients. That's essentially
Completely.
what this whole group's about.
Yeah.
And if you're not challenged, then it's no fun anymore. But that's just me.
It's not
But
working. You gotta step it up, you know.
yeah,
But I hear
absolutely.
you, dude. I really do appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no problem, dude. Thank you so much.
All right, talk to you soon, man.
All right, bye.